Have you ever wondered why is so much pedophilia in the schools? Why is so much pedophilia and molestations amongst families, communities, and judges and the laws, and no one ever says anything about it? And you like, well, I know when they go to court or anything. This is so disturbing. This is about to let you know why pedophilia is in the schools, why agendas is being pushed. Now this happened years ago. Now they just following up. This about to show you how the LBG community got started. This documentary is about pedophiles. And if this book was one of the worstest book in America, how in God's name is this? How is they even teaching the kids these teachings? But let's get to it. I'm going to be breaking this down because it's like 2 hours and 44 minutes. I was trying to do it last night on the stream, but it didn't work, so I figured this just got to be seen with all this stuff with the kids and oh my goodness. Okay, let's get to it.
American history.
It would find its way into every aspect of our decision making in our lives.
Dr. Judith Reisman is renowned for her expertise on the damaging influence of pornography. She has testified repeatedly before the U.S. Congress. Her research has been used by the FBI and by governments throughout the Western world when determining their policies on obscenity. She is author of the book, Kinsey, Crimes and Consequences, in which she details the devastating impact of Alfred Kinsey in America, an influence she believes is behind the growing number of sexual predators who seem to come from all walks of life.
Teachers, doctors, lawyers, judges, people are being caught right and left, sacrificing their lives and their families' lives to their addictions to child pornography. How do you think it happened? It did not start today. It started back with Kinsey, and who then kicked off what has become today's horror show. Child sexual abuse, rape, torture. People say, well, you can't track that all to Kinsey. Well, you can track enough of it to make an awfully frightening case.
While Dr. Reisman's view may seem extreme, her evidence is disturbing, the results of which are so often reported in our nightly news.
35-year-old convicted sex offender Bradley Meinhardt was sentenced to just 1 to 3 years in prison for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl in East Penn, and the guy had a prior.
Here's the suspect right here, Joseph Edward Duncan. He has a long history of sexual aggression.
Here's Larry Don McQuaid, the 41-year-old former school bus driver who's confessed to sexually abusing more than 200 children.
I was able to manipulate parents and children alike, that I was such a nice guy that I wouldn't do something as wrong and disgusting and as that. I consider myself a demon. It's too dangerous for me to be on the street.
Should he be released?
We tried to protest parole. Unfortunately, as I said, the statute requires his release.
I didn't know that the average sex offender predator molests 100 children. I mean, that just makes my outrage even more.
For years, Americans have wondered why repeat sex offenders so often receive light prison sentences only to be released back into society. According to Dr. Reisman, the answer is Alfred Kinsey.
The laws were changed based upon his fraudulent data, and he was directly involved in those changes. Kinsey went state by state. I have his testimony in California in 1949, telling a committee that was about to toughen the sex laws and toughen up about the laws to protect children because there'd been a murder of 2 little girls. He goes to California to testify in 1949 that you should release everybody, that pedophiles and pederasts did not repeat their crimes, that parole was absolutely critical, that would reduce our sex crimes. The committee believes him. They reduce all of our sex crimes, they parole people, and they haven't stopped.
When the Kinsey report was first released, the famous ACLU lawyer Morris Ernst wrote that virtually every page of the Kinsey report touches on the legal code. He told the legal profession that no bar association, law school journal, or lawyers committee can consider sex laws without the Kinsey study. According to Westlaw, the most widely used legal database, between the years 1982 to 2000, there were approximately 650 citations to Alfred Kinsey.
The model penal code that was adopted just after 1955 was based on Kinsey's research.
This is a flow chart I put together to describe how the Kinsey research gutted American laws. Through the American Law Institute, ALI, the American Law Institute Model Penal Code, 1955. That was where protections were then removed for women and children from American law system. The U.S. justice system from 1948 to today, that's what this is.
After publishing his reports, Kinsey traveled the country, giving lectures at universities and testifying before lawmakers. He was received as the leading scientific expert in the world on human sexuality. In particular, he discussed laws concerning sex offenders and the education of children.
Of children, he said 100% of are orgasmic from birth. Therefore, children can benefit from sex with adults and even incest, which is illegal. So we need to lower the age of consent. He was working toward making everything legal, but that's all right. Children need early explicit school sex education since they're sexual from birth, which was illegal at the time. Now it's everywhere.
What that sound like? Sound like the shit that they putting in our schools. Okay.
They need masturbation and hetero and homosexual acts to be taught to them, which was illegal, and now it's being taught. And about parole, Kinsey said that sex offenders rarely repeat sex crimes. Therefore, all sex offenders should be paroled, which is exactly what started to take place.
Part of Kinsey's defense of pedophiles was that children were not really harmed by sexual contact with adults. Therefore, it made no sense to incarcerate pedophiles for lengthy prison terms.
1950.
Did you just hear that bullshit? It ain't gonna affect the kids, so we gonna let them out because it's not gonna harm nobody but the people that you giving the time to. Fuck out of here.
Rockefeller funded the American Law Institute Model Penal Code. 1952, a Harvard Law Review called for a code to change our sex laws in accordance with what Kinsey had objectively found. And then in 1955, the code was created and sent out to all legislators in the country via these important people, judge, lawyers, sociologists, lawyers, and so forth. And from there, that went the ALI model, the sex offenses section, sent to states all over the country, adopted all or in part beginning in 1956 here and moving on to Illinois, to Minnesota and so forth, and all other states of the Union.
As Dr. Reisman noted, the Model Penal Code was financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. Not coincidentally, the Rockefeller Foundation also financed the research of Alfred Kinsey. In the 1950s, a congressional committee was formed under Congressman B. Carroll Reese to investigate the influence of the large tax-exempt foundations, including Rockefeller.
There was a huge concern at the time in the 1950s that the foundations were now being run by people with a strikingly strident a libertarian or liberal agenda, which resisted and resented the Judeo-Christian way of life.
The late Norman Dodd was the director of research for the Reese Committee. In an interview recorded shortly before his death, Dodd stated that part of what the committee had learned was that the objective of the great foundations was to remove America from the values on which she was built, and to do so through the education system.
What we had uncovered was the determination of these large endowed foundations, this Carnegie Endowment story and the Ford Foundation and the Guggenheim and the Rockefeller Foundation, all